Alright guys, hope you're all staying indoors and keeping safe. Yesterday I went over the entire Title Update 9 patch notes and I was delighted not to see an M1A nerf. Not because I don't think it's an outlier, because it is, but because there are no significant changes to NPC power which could compensate for that nerf. Well, I logged into the game after TU9 today and I saw this. My M1A pre-TU9 had around 540k damage, probably a little bit over, and now, well, it's been nerfed by a lot, by about actually 40%. And what's worse is this is a stealth nerf, because there is nothing in the patch notes about this. So today I want to talk about that and why I don't agree with this change. So firstly, this is some news I didn't think I'd be reporting today, to be completely honest. This isn't a rant video, by the way, guys. I'm just curious why the decision was made this way. The devs had previously said the M1A was an outlier and that they're going to look to balance the weapons. So I did expect something to change, but when they released the patch notes yesterday, I was relieved, to be honest. If you watch my video, you can probably hear it in my voice. Now, there is no doubt that the M1A, it's like the P416 when the Division 2 launched. It was far superior than most other weapons in the game. And if you notice, I'm using past tense because of this nerf, it's no longer that way. So it was far superior than most of the weapons in the game, that's true. But I'd argue that the M1A, along with maybe some other weapons like the Pestilence or the MG5, with the right build, felt like the only time you as an agent had some significant power and damage against NPCs, especially as the content got harder, especially as a solo player where you have no additional kind of like CC assistance. When you're playing in a group, of course you get the CC assistance, things just feel generally easier, but when you're not, you do need that damage. And as a solo player, I know how hard this is going to hit me when I actually play the game. Now, I think the devs have looked at this the wrong way. They've looked at the M1A and they've gone, this weapon is far superior to most other weapons in the game, so let's nerf it by 40%. When I think they should be looking at the M1A power and saying to themselves, everyone is using this, everyone is enjoying using some with power or somewhat power in the game. We should consider getting everything else up to this level. Now, there's always the argument of power creep when it comes to buffing everything else up, and I get that, but the devs did it before with skills and weapons. They took the P416, if you remember, they took the P416 high damage ceiling when it was an outlier, and they buffed everything to its level, right? Why did they do that? Well, it's because the P416 made you feel powerful in terms of damage, and the devs wanted everything else to make you feel that way, and I think that's the right way of thinking. So why then, with the M1A, why did they decide not to think that way and actually do the opposite and make us feel less powerful with these changes? I'm generally curious, because let's not forget, on top of the M1A, they nerfed named items as well, along with other things that make different builds feel powerful in PvE. I really think the devs need to provide us with some insight into their decision, and I suspect we're going to get that in tomorrow's State of the Game. Now, it's true that in my last video on the M1A, I said I wanted to see one of two things if they were going to do this. Either they buff other weapons up to the M1A power, like with what they did when we had the P416 as an outlier, or they do nerf the M1A, but this has to come with significant NPC changes to complement the nerf. The worst case scenario was always going to be a huge nerf to the M1A and no changes to NPCs. And yet here we are with probably the worst case scenario. I thought the M1A might get a nerf, but I didn't expect it to be anywhere near as of what it is, because this was no incremental nerf. This is 40%, and in fact now the damage on the M1A is the same, and I'm talking about the M1A that people are generally using, but the damage is the same as like the SOCOM M1A, except the SOCOM has more RPM and it has a larger magazine size. I'm just confused how this is now considered balanced. There are arguments that the SOCOM's got worse accuracy and blah blah blah, and maybe when you compare the two, the DPS is roughly the same because of shots and whatever, but still, I don't consider this balanced against NPCs. But as I said, this is beside the point really, because ultimately no one was using the SOCOM M1A before. No one was using 95% of the weapons in the game before T9, because it's like throwing a goat into a black hole. It just does nothing. The NPCs They just soak that damage up, no problem. This is why people were using the M1A. It, along with few others, provided some sense of power in the game. Not power in terms of your survivability, obviously, but in terms of you doing damage. So, unless the devs have made some stealth nerfs to red bar NPCs or NPCs overall, we're going to be less powerful with TU9 than before in terms of damage, but just as squishy as before. Surely that cannot be what the devs want us to feel like, surely. If I was to go onto the forums now, Reddit, Twitter, whatever, I don't think you're going to find any thread where anyone has ever said the game is too easy. No one has said they kill stuff too quickly, right, and everything needs to be nerfed. In fact, I think people have been saying the opposite for some time. Even the best players in the game have not said the game is too easy. Because, you've got Legendary, which is very, very difficult. It's for the 1%, and the best players, they can do it, but it's difficult, as it should be. So I don't understand why they've gone the opposite way. I'm curious as to why the devs felt that such a drastic nerf was needed with no significant NPC nerfs. Unfortunately, I think I know the answer. And it's that nerfing the M1A down to the power of other weapons or less, possibly, removes it from being the only weapon people really used, certainly at higher difficulties. And, it's a simple enough change to make, right? It's not overly difficult, I don't believe. It means people will turn to use other weapons now, and that in itself is not inherently a bad thing. Having weapon diversity is important in a looter shooter game, and I think everyone would agree with that. What I suspect is a lot more difficult is a significant pass on NPCs to bring them down a peg. That, I suspect, will take a lot longer. So, they nerf the M1A now, and they address the NPCs later. That's what I think is going to happen here. Now, on making this video, it does now appear that the devs have added the M1A nerf to the patch notes. I've just found this and I'm adding it now to this script or this video. It still doesn't change anything though. Of course, no one wants to be forced to use one gun in order to compete in the hardest content. That's just ridiculous. I want to use all the different guns in the game. Everyone wants diversity, but people don't want to lose the frankly minor power that we had in the process. Now, there were some changes to TU9, and I'm going to cover this in Friday's video. There were some changes that I'm going to hopefully test, and I'm hoping they're good, like the damage that elites do to skills, although I would have applied the stat to every NPC, but we'll have to see how that works, and I'm hopefully looking forward to some good changes in respect to that. But no one wants to lose that power. I just don't understand why we can't feel powerful massive. Now, what I really hope they don't do is apply the same thinking to something like Avatar, which is a game they're currently working on. I hope they don't apply that same thinking there, because you're going to have vines hanging from flying islands, and you're going to jump to one, and it's going to kind of like move out of the way, and it's going to take you down, because it's just going to be ridiculous, right? They're going to make the easy. They're just going to make you feel like you're not powerful. They're going to make you feel like you can't do anything. Now, one of the other reasons that I believe that they've done this, or that we as players feel so not powerful, and why I think the devs might want to go this route, is because they want it to be a cover-based shooter. They want people to be in cover. They want to punish you for being out of cover. Well, if that's the way you want to do it, then maybe we don't have so much stuff in the game which forces us out of cover. Because then we're in a situation where we're being forced out of cover and we're being instant killed, or we're staying in cover and we're being instant killed. And so you can see the problem. You have to go one way or the other. And that's what I think they are doing. That's why I think that this game, in terms of NPC damage against players, has gone this route. And I hope they change their mind on that. If they're going to go a particular route, cover-based or not, they really have to implement it properly. But I just think this M1A nerf, I knew it was coming. They said it was coming. It wasn't in the patch notes. I felt hopeful that they were maybe going to do something like what they did with the P416 and maybe reconsider that position, bring everything up, and keep us at the same power than we were before, make some slight tweaks to NPCs, although I would like to see more, and just make us feel like we have some sort of power. That's not the case, and I think they've gone the opposite. They've gone the opposite way, and for me, it's the worst case scenario. For me, it's what I never imagined would happen here. I never imagined we'd get a 40% M1A nerf, and I certainly don't think it's for the benefit of the game. I really cannot see how this benefits the game when we as players feel unbelievably squishy at the moment, and now they are nerfing the damage that we can do. Doesn't make sense to me. Like I said at the start of the video, guys, this isn't a rant or anything. I'm just genuinely curious as to the direction that the developers are going here, and I hope they can address this tomorrow in State of the Game. Now, I'm pretty sure they're going to address the M1A nerf. You know, there's no way they can avoid that, I don't believe, because people are spamming it now. People are saying, look, why is this happening? So I'm pretty sure they're going to address that, but I would like them to address the direction they're going. Okay, do they want us to feel like we are literally nothing? Basically, we have no power. Is that the way they want us to feel, or do they want us to feel powerful? Because the way I'm seeing it is they don't want us to feel powerful. That's what these changes are making, unless, of course, as I said before, they are working on a significant NPC patch to bring it in line or complement that nerf. But if that's the case, then I would have waited until that was ready before I did this M1A nerf. The other thing that's just come across my mind, and this, I've not wrote this down, this is completely just off the top of my head, but another thing that I'm thinking of why they made such a drastic change here is because of PvP. And that's because there are plenty of videos out there of people one-shotting people with M1As in PvP. So this is to address that immediate fix now. Of course, PvP needs a huge change generally anyway for most stuff in the game, and they really have to focus down on PvP. I think this game could have good PvP, and I have another news video coming out shortly because there is some stuff coming in respect to that. But that needs a whole new pass. But I'd like to see them addressing this in tomorrow's State of the Game. Of course, I will have you covered for that. I will have it, here on the channel. So make sure you've got notifications turned on if you want to tune in for the recap of that. With that said, guys, thanks for all of your support, and until the next one, epic out.